What's up everyone, Mitch Morty here. In today's video, I'm going to be telling what I think the potential story of Legends Z to A is going to be based on the already flourishing Pokemon lore. So strap on your tinfoil hats because it's going to be a doozy. As we all know, the next Legends game is going to be called Pokemon Legends Z to A. Now, when I think of Kalos and its past, one big character comes to mind, and that is AZ, which is just the reverse ZA. So I really think that the premise of this story is going to be kind of focused around AZ's story, but we'll get into that a little later on. So the player is going to be recruited to help build up Lumiose City from the ground up. Now, I don't know if we're going to be like absorbed from like another timeline or another dimension like we were in Legends Arceus, or if we're just gonna already be there. I just don't know. So I think the map will at first start off as just like a landscape, so like trees, mountains, stuff like that, and eventually as the player progresses through the story, it becomes more civilized with more buildings. It could even start off as a village, and then as the story progresses and the story carries out missions and quests, this village starts to become more populated, becomes more civilized, and becomes a city. Kind of like how it works in Dark Cloud for the PS2. So to our knowledge so far, the game is going to be based just in Lumiose City, not outside of it or anything like that. But I think it's still going to be like a pretty big game, and it being like a landscape and not, you know, just in the city, like it's a landscape first. I think it's going to be split up in like kind of like different biomes, and this will like help accommodate like ice types, fire types, water types, stuff like that. And if you look at the map, it kind of already does look like the terrarium in the Blueberry Academy. So I think it's going to be divided into sections that have different biomes, and then in turn different Pokemon spawning, kind of like how it is in Legends Arceus. Now, to truly understand the story that I think this game is going to tell, we need to understand where we are in the timeline. So we need to consult a few things first, one of them being the real life Paris, France. If you didn't know, Lumiose City is based on Paris, and Kalos is based on France, with the Lumiose City Gym being the Eiffel Tower located in the middle of Lumiose City. So the Eiffel Tower wasn't built until sometime in January in the late 1800s. That's like another like tinfoil hat theory I have, is that the game is going to be released in January 2025 to kind of like coincide with like the construction of the Eiffel Tower, which was also built in January. But that's something different. However, there are buildings in Paris that date back several centuries. Civilization alone in Paris can date back to the 3rd century BC. Now, I don't think we're going that far back, but it is good to know that Paris does have its roots that far in the past. Another thing we need to understand is the Kalos War. So 3,000 years prior to the events of present-day games, the king of Kalos, AZ, lost his beloved Floette in a war with a neighboring country, which is actually never named. And that's kind of why I'm making this video today. AZ then created something known as the ultimate weapon that was made to create eternal life. And he uses this weapon to bring his beloved Floette back to life. Now, despite successfully bringing his Floette back to life, he's still grieving, and eventually takes his ultimate weapon, which was a tool to bring things back to life, and uses it as a tool to take life, and completely ends the war, wiping out Pokemon and presumably people alike on both sides of Kalos and the neighboring country. Another thing that we need to know about is Zygarde. Now, obviously, it's Z to A. The Z is like black and green with scales, just like Zygarde. So I think Zygarde is going to be the main kind of legend in this game. Zygarde's dex entry more or less says that it is like a protector of the ecosystem, and whenever the ecosystem is disrupted, it'll emerge and kind of try to fight off whatever is destroying the ecosystem. Now, what could destroy the ecosystem, you might ask? Like pollution, things like deforestation, I don't know. Building an entire city out of a landscape. Now, with the story and where we're at in the timeline, I think that this will actually tie into exactly where the Great Crater of Paldea came from. So you've probably heard the theory that AZ firing the ultimate weapon caused the Great Crater. So I think this story will kind of add more fuel to that fire. So let's assume that the country that Kalos was at war with is Paldea. AZ fires the weapon into Paldea, killing Pokemon and people alike on both sides of Kalos and Paldea. Now, take a look at this. On the westernmost side of Kalos, you have all these stones. This is supposed to be like a cemetery of the Pokemon and probably people that gave their lives during this war. Now, if you take a look at the easternmost side of Paldea, and mind you, like Kalos is France, Paldea is Spain, they're right next to each other. There's like those 3 watchtowers, and also like those 3 like dragon type trainers that use only Gen 6 Pokemon. But also, if you go from there to the Great Crater, there's nothing but desert. There's nothing, just like destruction. So what I think happened is like AZ fired this weapon and went and just like ripped through Kalos and ripped through Paldea and eventually exploded in Paldea. If we go into Lysander's labs in X and Y, there are books that kind of tell AZ's story. Like the fact that AZ had a younger brother that led a legion of greedy souls that wanted to seize Kalos. Now to me, wanting to seize land or like a country or something kind of gives me like king or like emperor vibes. And mind you, AZ is King Kalos at the time. So to kind of assume that AZ's brother was also an emperor or a king elsewhere, I don't think that seems too far-fetched. Witnessing what the ultimate weapon did to Kalos, AZ's brother took the weapon and buried it underground. AZ's brother then told his child where the weapon can be found. So at this time, AZ doesn't know where it's at. After AZ's younger brother buries it and tells his child where it can be found, he then dies. Now it is important to note that firing the ultimate weapon and reviving Floette, AZ also gained eternal life. So that's how he's still alive after 3,000 years throughout this whole story. 1,000 years after the ultimate weapon is buried, the Emperor Paldea sent a search team into the crater to investigate rumors of treasure. Now to me, taking a search team and investigating a presumably very dangerous area just to get some treasure is pretty much leading a legion of greedy souls. So at this time, the Emperor of Paldea is one of AZ's younger brother's descendants. Time goes on and AZ's younger brother's descendants are still in power of Paldea. So now we're 1,000 years in the past of current games. And that's where we're at in the timeline. Not to the point of like ancient times where we're like building pyramids, and not too modern to the point where we're like driving cars, but kind of like right in the middle. So we're building all this stuff on top of this land and definitely messing with the ecosystem. So Zygarde emerges. Mind you, if we reference Zygarde's Pokedex entry again, it's pretty much just a living, walking ultimate weapon. AZ, still grieving the loss of its Floette. Remember, he didn't find it until 3,000 years after he fired the weapon, and didn't find it until the end of X and Y. Sees Zygarde emerge. Not wanting to go through this pain again, AZ locates his brother's descendant, gets the key from the ultimate weapon. That's why in X and Y he's wearing the key around his neck. Locates it and fires the ultimate weapon at Zygarde, and splat! Zygarde is then eviscerated into cells, which you then have to collect later on to capture and have one last final battle with Zygarde at the end of the game. Boom. Now, obviously, this is just like my tinfoil hat theory that I literally kind of just like continued to think of just based on like this little 2-minute like teaser trailer that we got for Legend Z to A. But I think like I do make some valid points with the lore and all that stuff, and it all like finally like tying in, because like there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know about AZ, and he's just a very mysterious character, and I think this game can answer some of those questions. That's it for me. Subscribe for more Pokemon content. See ya. Peace.